Hey everyone, Rin here, and thank you for coming. And tonight, we're going to be taking a deeper look at episode 4 of season 1 of Marvel Studios' latest Disney Plus show, Hawkeye. Welcome back everyone, and let's just get right into it, cause yeah, what a show we got this week from Marvel in episode 4 of Hawkeye. So, coming off of last week, I knew things were starting to turn up in terms of what we could expect from Hawkeye on a week-to-week basis. The first 2 episodes, in my opinion, were good openers and set the stage for what was a great outing in episode 3 last week. We got a lot more of Echo and a good bit about her backstory, along with the teaser for Uncle, whom by now I'm sure you know is heavily believed by the fandom at large to be Kingpin, portrayed by Vincent D'Onofrio, as well as a more fully fleshed out relationship between Clint and Kate with some much needed building up of their overall chemistry. Seeing as we left off last week with Jack holding Clint at sword point with the Ronin blade, we obviously pick back up here with both of our heroes basically being interrogated by Jack and Kate's mom, Eleanor. The dialogue here is actually quite interesting as we see Kate and Clint continue to butt heads about whether or not if they're partners. And at some point, Jack even thanks Clint for saving the world, which we can tell is quite irritating for Clint as the showrunners have chosen to make a point of the fact that everyone continues to worsen his survivor's guilt by thanking him for saving the world, not acknowledging the many friends he's lost in the process and the damage he's taking as a result, both physically and mentally. Kate's mom also confirms that it was in fact her laptop Kate hacked into last week and gathered intel on the Tracksuit Mafia and Kazi, which eventually leads to the discovery by Clint's wife that Jack is the CEO of a shell company called Sloan Unlimited and cleaning the money for the entire operation. For me, I've learned that whenever an overtly obvious path is laying before you in a series like this, you can always bet on it being a misdirect. So I'm going to posit a guess that Jack could be innocent in all of this, and that maybe Kate's mom is behind it all and simply framing him for the fall if that ends up being the case. I do believe Jack will pan out to be Swordsman at some point in the series as he is in the comics, but the route to him getting there will be very different, as in the comics he was actually Armand's son. A big point in the episode here is Eleanor stopping Clint on his way out to let him know that she cannot lose Kate under any circumstances. This, of course, has effects all the way down the line as Clint takes it to heart and becomes even more cautious and against the idea of Kate tagging along with him. To note, some could even take Eleanor's approach the wrong way as we see her basically throw Black Widow's death right in Clint's face.
Let me clarify.
Yeah.
She is not a superhero.
I mean, she's pretty good at all this, but...
Natasha Romanoff was pretty damn good at it, wasn't she?
So I feel that it's becoming quite obvious that Eleanor is a lot more involved than we originally thought she was, because she basically tells Clint to get lost and drop it. I do support the theory that Kate's mom is likely the one behind all of this, seeing as her company, Bishop Security, would have the means to know just about everything about everybody, such as her bringing up Clint's family to him, which used to be one of the most well-kept secrets there was. And we even see her get on the phone to make a call to someone, which at this point we have to assume is either up the chain to the big guy you don't want to mess with, meaning Kingpin, or maybe down the line to Echo or Kazi. I would even say maybe she's calling Yelena to come in and clean up her Hawkeye situation, or maybe even Val, who then sent Yelena along.
It's Eleanor. Could you call me back, please? It's urgent.
We also learn a lot more about Clint's wife lore in this episode, such as her speaking German to not be overheard by the kids. It actually seems like she's very integral to everything Hawkeye does, as she actually gets the intel we discussed earlier about Jack. And they brought the watch we saw from the first episode at the auction back up again, which is something very important to the both of them, it would seem. The watch turns out to be a vintage Rolex that belonged to Clint during his time as Ronin, and has serious connections to someone it would seem Clint cares a good bit about, because he doesn't want it to be found. I believe now, all things considered, that the watch belonged to Laura at some point, and that we'll later find out she was an agent of some sort herself, and maybe her and Clint met on a mission or something along those lines, and the watch confirms that she's still alive to whoever it was she used to work for.
I've been wondering, verschwinde nach mir auf dem Gelände?
You mean the Rolex?
As this has been marketed as a bit of a Christmas event, we of course had to have some holiday cheer at some point. So, seeing Kate come over after watching her mom and Jack cruel over one another to bring the spirit to Clint was quite wholesome. She shows up in a Santa hat, which is, of course, a call out to the comics where Clint wears the hat basically the entire issue. Clint by this time is covered from head to toe in frozen food cooling pads, as the show continues to pour on the fact that unlike his Avengers friends, he's human and all the cuts and bruises do eventually begin to add up. So, lucky the pizza dog and Kate pay back in full the movie marathon Clint was supposed to have with his family.
Get you home in time for the big day. Figured in the meantime we could celebrate. Check this out. I got movies.
We also finally get discussion about Hawkeye's trick arrows, as he explains to Kate that there are no trick arrows but trick arrow heads, and that they can't just go on any old arrow. And that for every arrow that gets shot, he has to retrieve them, which is why he sends her to get assistance from the LARPers, from the police among them, as his gear is in police evidence lockup. We also see him teach her a cool new trick, which I'm sure will be paid off at some point later in the series.
Are you ready?
And we even get a deep cut comic reference with the boomerang arrow discussion, except here Clint is the one that believes they're a bit ridiculous as Kate proposes them, whereas in the comics it was Hawkeye that came up with it, and Kate even uses it to save him at some point. So we'll definitely be seeing it surface at some point down the line in the series, as we see actual boomerangs later in the episode in Maya's apartment. And we finally got back around to discussing that and what took place in Budapest, in regards to S.H.I.E.L.D. and Nick Fury sending him to take out Natasha and him deciding to not do it, which ends up being the best shot he ever took, the one that he didn't. This is one of many times where they actually begin to play the Black Widow theme music in the background that we heard on Vormir, as well as they do later when Yelena shows up. Kate finally makes the connection between Clint and Ronin, which I feel like she's been tiptoeing around for a while now. You can tell from the flashback we get when Clint takes out his hearing aid that everything from his family being snapped away to his time as Ronin and eventually Nat's death have really taken a toll on him. We also see a callback in this episode to the Thanos was right belief that exists in the MCU, which was written on the urinal in episode 1, when Clint can be seen drinking from a mug that also has it on there. And when Kate appeared in this shirt, I immediately recognized it from the comics, as she wore the same exact thing there. So this was a cool Easter egg as well. And later when Clint sends her to the LARPers, we see yet another comic book character appear in Wendy Conrad, who turns out to be Bombshell from the comics, which is later paid off even further when she brings Clint his gear back in her bag that her wife has Bombshell monogrammed on. We get to see Grills again as well, right before Clint goes to see Kazi, which is eerie in a sense, as we know in the comics Kazi actually kills Grills to get to Clint. We also got our route as to how Kate and Clint will get new costumes, as all the Disney Plus shows have managed to give us in a sense, as the LARPers agree to make them for them if Kate gets them the material.
Okay, how about enough materials to make your costumes plus 2 more?
Hawkeye,
Oh, hi.
arrow retrieval mission complete.
No, I mean,
My wife gave me this bag. It's embroidered. It says Bombshell.
Clint also relays the message to Kazi that if Maya doesn't stop, things won't end well for her, which you can tell bothers Kazi a bit. So I do believe we'll begin to see some dissension among the ranks in the Tracksuit Mafia as Kazi tries to put the brakes on Maya's Ronin chase. And when Clint and Kate actually show up to the location of the Rolex watch, I knew something major was coming. Now I have to say that this scene didn't make me view Kate in the best light, as I feel that just a little deductive reasoning on her part could have really aided her a lot here. I get her choosing to take the authoritative approach and jump the gun before Clint to go inside the apartment, but once she's in and sees the strobe lights flashing, as a person whose mom owns a security company, you would kinda expect for her to maybe know that this is some sort of silent alarm system, which of course ends up belonging to Maya.
Okay. I'm at the door.
And here we get one of the best scenes I think we've gotten thus far in the series, with Maya surprising Kate and Clint also being attacked. Clint thinks initially that it's Echo, but Kate knows that that's not the case, as she's fighting her inside of the apartment. So at this point, I was pretty sure this was Yelena having just arrived, which of course it was. The four-way fight scene on top of the roof, once Echo and Kate make it over to Yelena and Clint, was awesome, and it do pay off for the audience in my opinion. What's cool here is that the outfit we see Yelena in is right out of the Thunderbolts comics. So the theory mentioned earlier of Eleanor having possibly called Val kinda lines up even more. Plus, it was in fact Val that set Yelena on Clint's trail. I was shocked when Yelena tossed Kate off the roof, because we know Yelena is technically not a villain at this point, and it seemed like a pretty overtly cruel way to end the Kate character, which is why we see Clint in such desperation, as the scene of him here going to save her is a mirror of him looking down at Natasha before she fell to her death, and instead of pulling Kate up, he cuts her down and tells her to leave, trying to save her clearly and hold true to what he told her mom of keeping her safe and alive. Kate obviously comes back, of course, and ends up sending Echo away after stunning everyone and then putting an arrow in her shoulder. But once the Black Widow stinger came out, I think Clint knew just what level of threat they were dealing with. Now, the scene of Kate holding Yelena in her aim and choosing not to shoot her was very impactful for me, as it's another mirror of exactly what Clint told her earlier of the best shot he ever took was the one he didn't. I do believe Kate and Yelena will eventually be a tandem of force within the MCU, basically taking the place of their forebears and the people whose names they will eventually take over. Yelena being the new Black Widow going forward, and Kate possibly being the next Hawkeye. The look the pair shared definitely seemed to allude to the fact that we can expect a lot more story to take place between the two. This all sends Clint over the edge, as he now realizes just how serious matters have gotten, as someone has hired a Black Widow assassin. We the audience know that may actually not be the case, and that Yelena is actually there for revenge, but this isn't information Clint has as of yet. Next week's episode 5 is going to be very interesting in terms of how all of this will play out, and if Yelena will find out that Clint and Nat meant much more to each other than she may have known. And as if all of this playing out wasn't enough to look forward to, we still have Echo out lurking for justice, as well as Uncle waiting in the wings to pop out. In closing, episode 4 continued the upward trend of what Hawkeye has been progressively doing since its first episode. That being continuing to get better and better in both the quality of its story and the thrill of its action and fight scenes. The show continues to egg us on even more with teasers and cameos of characters like Uncle and Yelena, and I for one can't decide who I'd rather see more from this point forward. We knew Yelena would eventually be showing up, but now that she's arrived, I honestly can't wait for Yelena and Kate to share the screen again and actually interact. The future of the MCU is incredibly bright when you consider the fact that Marvel has two of the best young actresses working in Florence Pugh and Hailee Steinfeld, both just beginning their superhero journeys. I will of course be continuing to cover all live action Marvel and Star Wars Disney Plus content, and films from all walks of life that I have the pleasure of watching. And if you feel so inclined, I would love to have you back here week in and week out to continue to cover it all with us. Again, guys, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and click that bell for notifications if you've enjoyed our content here tonight. Jump down in the comments and let me know your thoughts. And while you're at it, be sure to check out some of the other content here on the channel. All of the necessary links are listed here below for you to keep up with the coming content and shareables. Please be sure to follow me on all social media platforms. Or just the one you use most frequently. We are slowly but surely building a community here, and I would personally love for you to be a part of that. And last but not least, we have a merch store. So whether you see something you like or just simply want to support the channel, head on over to our shop and grab something, or grab everything. But again, thank you so much, guys and gals, for visiting here with us today. I really appreciate each and every viewing minute of your time you've given us. There's loads of content we'll be sending your way, so I'll be seeing you. But for now, be blessed. And it was written.
Looking out across the nighttime, the city sleeps inside. Yeah, hear her voice shake my window, sweet seduce inside. Yeah, send me out into the nighttime, for walls won't hold me tonight.